You want to give them a little heads up about what you're doing, what they should be looking for?
Okay, so we've got chapters 4 and 5.
Okay. Here.
We'll tell you guys the questions that you guys can think about it while we're recording. So the first question says, there's a part of the play where Nick mentions a certain quote, but is there only the pursuing the busy and the tired? How do you think this quote reflects on the series of events so far? And also, if you were Gatsby, do you think you would agree with the quote? 2 is, what is Jordan's story of Daisy's marriage reveal about Daisy? And how does having a prestigious family as old wealth, as opposed to acquiring new wealth, impact the ethical makeup of each character in the text? So, I'm trying to think of that. Should we introduce ourselves? No, we got name tags.
I'm
I'm just saying.
At 9 o'clock one morning, late in July, Gatsby's gorgeous car lurked up to the rocky drive to my door.
Good morning, little sport. We're having lunch with you today, and I thought we'd ride up together.
I had talked with him perhaps 6 times in the past month and found, to my disappointment, he had such little to say. So my first impression that he was a person of some unidentified consequence and gradually faded, and he had become simply the proprietor of the elaborate roadhouse next door. And then came the discerning ride, slopping himself indecisively on the knee of his caramel colored suit.
Look here, old sport. What's your opinion of me, anyhow? Well, I'm going to tell you something about my life. I don't want you to get a wrong idea of me. All these stories you hear, I'll tell you God's truth. I'm the son of some people in the Middle West, all dead now. I was brought up in America, but educated at Oxford, because all my ancestors have been educated there for many years. It's a family tradition.
He looked at me sideways, and I knew why Jordan Baker believed he was lying. He'd heard of the phrase, educated at Oxford, swallowed it or choked on it as though it had bothered him before. And with this doubt, his whole statement fell to pieces. And I wondered if there wasn't something a little sinister about him after all. What part of the Middle West?
San Francisco. My family all died and came to a good deal of money. After that, I lived like a young Raja in all the capitals of Europe, Paris, Venice, Rome, collecting jewels, cheap rubies, hunting big game, painting little things for myself only. I'm trying to forget something very sad that had happened to me long ago. Then came war, old sport. It was a great relief, and I tried very hard to die, but I seemed to bear another chance at life. I accepted a commission as first lieutenant when it began. In the Argonne Forest, it took 2 machine gun detachments so far forward that there was a half a mile gap on either side of us, where the infantry couldn't advance. We stayed there 2 days and 2 nights. 130 men were found with insignia of 3 German division among the piles of death. I was promoted to be a major, and every Allied government gave me a decoration, even Montenegro, little Montenegro, down on the Adriatic Sea. That's one from Montenegro.
Major J. Gatsby, Valor Extraordinary.
I'm going to make a big request of you today. So I thought you ought to know something about me. I didn't want you to think I was just somebody, some nobody. You see, I usually find myself among strangers because I drift here and there, trying to forget the sad things that happened to me. You'll hear about it this afternoon.
At lunch?
No, this afternoon. I happened to find out that you're taking Miss Baker to tea.
Do you mean you're in love with Miss Baker?
No, old sport, I'm not. But Miss Baker has kindly consented to speak to you about this matter.
Roaring noon, in a well-fed 42nd Street cellar, I met Gatsby for lunch. Blinking away the brightness of the street outside, my eyes picked him up out obscurely in the anteroom, talking to another man.
Mr. Caraway, this is my friend, Mr. Wilshire.
I understand you're looking for a business connection.
Oh no, this isn't the man. This is just a friend. I told you we'll talk about this some other time.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I had a wrong man.
Who is he anyway, an actor?
Mayor Molshine? No, he's a gambler. He's the man who fixed the World Series back in 1919.
Fix the World Series. Why isn't he in jail?
They can't get him, old sport. He's a smart man.
Come along with me for a minute. I gotta get low somewhere. Hey,
Have you been anyhow? How'd you happen to come up with one to eat?
I've been having lunch with Mr. Gatsby.
One October day in 1917, I had on a new plaid skirt that flew a little in the wind, and whenever this happened, the red, white, and blue banners in front of all the houses stretched out stiff and said, tut, 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 in a disapproving way. The largest of the banners and the largest of the lawns belonged to Daisy Hayes' house. She was just 18, 2 years older than me, and by far the most popular of all the young girls in Louisville. She dressed in white and had a little white roadster, and all day long the telephone rang in her house, and excited young officers from Camp Taylor demanded the privilege of monopolizing her that night. Hello, Jordan, she called him excitedly. Please come here. I was flattered that she wanted to speak to me because of all the older girls I admired her most. She asked me if I was going to the Red Cross and gave bandages. I was. Well, then, would I tell them that she couldn't come that day? The officer looked at Daisy while she was speaking in a way that every young girl wants to be looked at sometimes. And because it seemed romantic to me, I remembered the incident ever since. His name was Great Gatsby, and I didn't lay eyes on him again for over 40 years, even after I met him on Long Island and didn't realize it was the same man. Wild rumors were circulating about her, how her mother had found her packing her bag one winter night to go to New York and say goodbye to a soldier who was going overseas. She was effectually prevented, but she wasn't on speaking terms with her family for several weeks. After that, she didn't play around with the soldiers anymore. The next autumn, she was gay again, gay as ever. In June, she married Tom Buchanan of Chicago, with more pomp and circumstance than Louisville had ever knew before. I was bridesmaid. I came into her room half an hour before the bridal dinner and found her lying on her bed as lovely as the June night in her flower dress, and as drunk as a monkey. She had a bottle of sour in one hand and a letter in the other. She began to cry. She cried and cried. I rushed out and found her mother asleep, and we locked the door and got her into a cold bath. She wouldn't let go of the letter. She took it into the tub with her and squeezed it up into a rough ball and only let me leave it in the soap dish when she saw that it was coming to pieces in its mouth. Next day at 5 o'clock, she married Tom Buchanan without so much as a shiver, and started off on a 3-month trip to South Seas. I saw them in Santa Barbara when they came back, and I thought I'd never see a girl so mad about her husband. If he left the room for a minute, she'd look around uneasily and say, "Where's Tom gone?" And with the most distracted expression across until she saw him coming in the door. That was in August. A week after I left Santa Barbara, Tom ran into a wagon on a Ventura Road one night and ripped the front wheel off his car. The girl who was with him got into the papers too because her arm was broken, and she was one of the junior meets in the Santa Barbara hotel. Well, about 6 weeks ago, she heard the name Gatsby for the first time in years. It was when I asked you, do you remember? If you knew Gatsby in West Ed. After we had gone home, she came into my room and woke me up and said, "What Gatsby?" And when I described him, I was half asleep. She said in the strangest voice that it must be the man she used to know. It wasn't until then that I connected this Gatsby with the officer in her red car.
When Jordan Baker had finished telling all of it, we had left the plaza for half an hour and were driving in Victoria through Central Park. The sun had gone down behind the tall apartments of the movie stars in the West 50s, and clear voices of the girls, already gathered like crickets on the grass, rose through the hot twilight. It was a strange coincidence.
But it wasn't a coincidence at all.
Why not?
Gatsby bought that house that Daisy would be just across the bay. He wants to know if you'll invite Daisy to your house in the afternoon and let me come over.
The modesty of the man shook me. He had waited 5 years and bought a mansion where he dispensed starlight to casual moths so that he could come over some afternoon to a stranger's garden. Did I have to know all this before he can ask such a little thing?
He's afraid he's waited so long. He thought you might be offended, you see. He's a regular talk underneath it all.
Why didn't you ask to arrange a meeting?
He wants her to see his house, and your house is right next door.
It was dark now, and as we dipped under a little bridge, I put my arm around Jordan's golden shoulder and drew her toward me and asked her to dinner. Suddenly, I wasn't thinking of Daisy or Gatsby anymore, but of this clean, hard, limited person who indulged in universal skepticism and who leaned back gauntly just with the circle of my arm.
And Daisy ought to have something in her life.
Does she want to see Gatsby?
She's not to know about it. Gatsby doesn't want her to know. You're just supposed to invite her for tea.
Unlike Gatsby and Tom Buchanan, I had no girl who disembodied face floating along the dark cornices and blinding signs. And so I drew up the girl beside me, tightened my arms, her wan, scornful mouth smiled. So I drew her up again closely, this time to my face. When I came home to West Egg that night, I was afraid for a moment that my house was on fire. 2 o'clock and the whole corner of the peninsula was blazing with light, which fell unreal on the shrubbery and made thin flames upon the roadside wires. Turning a corner, I saw that it was Gatsby's house, lit from a tower to cellar. At first, I thought it was another party, a wild rout that had resolved itself into a hide-and-go-seek or sardiness in the box, with whole house thrown upon the game. But there wasn't a sound, only wind in the trees, which blew the wires and made the lights go off and on again, as if the house had winked into the darkness. As my taxi went away, I saw Gatsby walking towards me across the lawn. I talked with Miss Baker. I'm going to call Daisy tomorrow if I didn't open the tea.
Oh, that's all right. I don't want to put you in any trouble.
What day would suit you?
What day would suit you?
How about the day after tomorrow? The day agreed upon was pouring rain. At 11 o'clock, a man in raincoat, dragging in a lawnmower, tapped at my front door and said that Mr. Gatsby sent him over to cut my grass. This reminded me that I had forgotten to tell my family to come back. So I drove into West Egg Village to search for her among Soggy's whitewashed alleys and to buy some cups and lemons and flowers. The flowers were unnecessary, for a 2 o'clock greenhouse arrived from Gatsby with innumerable receptacles to contain it. An hour later, the front door opened nervously, and Gatsby, in a white flannel suit, silver shirt, and gold-colored tie, hurried in. He was pale, and there was dark signs of sleeplessness beneath his eyes.
Is everything all right?
The grass looks fine, if that's what you mean.
What grass? Oh, the grass in the yard? Looks very good. One of the papers said they thought the rain would stop about 4. I think it was the journal. Have you got everything you need in the shape of tea?
I took him into the pantry, where he looked a little reproachfully at the fridge. Together, we scrutinized the 12 lemon cakes from the shop. Will they do?
Of course, they're fine. Old sport.
The rain cooled about 3:30 to a damp mist through which occasional thin drops ran into. Gatsby looked at which vacant eyes through a copy of Plate Economics, started at the finished thread that shook the kitchen floor, and peered toward the bleared windows from time to time as a series of invisible but alarming happenings were taking place outside. Finally, he got up to report me, in an uncertain voice, that he was going to go home.
Nobody's coming to tea. It's too late.
Don't be silly. It's 2 minutes to 4. Under the dripping bare trees, a large open car was coming up the drive. It stopped. Daisy's face, tipped sideways beneath the 3-pointed lavender hat, looked out at me with a bright, aesthetic smile.
Is this absolutely where you live, my dearest one? Are you in love with me? Why did I have to come alone?
That's the secret of Castle Rock. Tell your chauffeur to go far. He spent an hour.
Come back in an hour, Ferdy. His name is Ferdy.
Well, that's fine.
What's funny?
Daisy turned her head as if there was a light, dignified knocking at the front door. I went out and opened it. Gatsby, pale as death with his hands plunged like weights in coat pockets, was standing in a puddle of water, glaring tragically into my eyes.
We met before.
We haven't met for many years.
I made an excuse at the first possible moment and got to my feet.
Where are you going? I got to speak to you about something before you go.
What's the matter?
This is a terrible mistake.
You're just embarrassed, that's all. Daisy's embarrassed too.
She's embarrassed.
Just as much as you are.
Don't talk so loud.
I realized that it wasn't the appropriate reply. Daisy came out of the house, and 2 rows of grass spots on her dress moved into the sunlight.
Oh, hello, old sport.
Oh, it stopped raining.
Has it? What do you think of that? It stopped raining.
I'm glad, Jay.
I want you and Daisy to come over my house. I'd like to show you her around. My house looks well, doesn't it? See how the whole part of it catches the light? Yes, it took me 3 years to earn that money that bought it.
I thought you inherited your money.
I did, old sport, but I lost most of it in the big panic, the panic of the war.
I think he hardly knew what he was saying, for when I asked him what business he was in, he answered, "That's my affair." Before he realized that it wasn't an appropriate reply, Daisy came out of the house, and 2 rows of brass buttons on her dress gleamed into the sunlight.
That huge house there?
Do you like it?
I love it. I don't see how you live there all alone.
I keep it always full of interesting people, night and day. People who do interesting things. Celebrated people.
His bedroom was the simplest room of all, except where the dresser was garnished with toilet set of pure dull gold. Daisy took the brush with delight and smoothed her hair, whereupon Gatsby sat down and shaded his eyes and began to laugh.
It's the funniest thing, old sport. I can't when I try to.
He had passed visibly through 2 states and was entering upon a 3rd. After his embarrassment and his unreasoning joy, he was consumed with wonder at her presence. He had been full of the idea so long, dreamt about it right through the end, waited with his teeth set, so to speak, at an inconceivable pitch of intensity. Now, in the reaction, he was running down like an overwhelming clock. Recovering himself in a minute, he opened for us 2 hulking cabinets, which held his matches and dressing gowns and ties, and his shirts, piled like bricks in stacks and dozen high.
I got a man in England who buys me clothes. He sends over a selection of things at the beginning of each season, spring and fall.
They're such beautiful shirts. It makes me sad because I've never seen such beautiful shirts.
If it wasn't for the mist, we could see your home across the bay. You'd always have a green light and burns all night at the end of your dock.
Daisy put her arm through his abruptly, but he seemed absorbed in what he had just said. Possibly it had occurred to him that the colossal significance of that life was now vanished forever. Compared to the great distance that had separated him from Daisy, it had seemed very near to her, almost touching her. It had seemed as close as the start of the moon, and now it was again a green light from one of them. His count of enchanted objects had diminished by 1. As I went over to say goodbye, I saw that the expression of a bewilderment had come back into Gatsby's face, as though a faint doubt had occurred to him, to the guilty present happiness. It had gone beyond her, beyond everything. He had thrown himself into it with a creative passion, adding it all the time, decking it out with every bright feather that had drifted his way. No amount of fire or freshness can challenge what a man will store up in his ghostly heart. They had forgotten me. But Daisy glanced up and held out her hand. Gatsby didn't know me now at all. I looked once more at them, and they looked back at me, remotely possessed by intense life. Then I went out of the room and down the marble steps into the rain, leaving them there together.
Man.